Founder of Laura's Botanicals here, clinical herbalist, holistic lifestyle coach, going back to you live today to talk about herbal, creating your herbal network, your resource network, so that you can have all the herbs and resources that you need to sustain your new holistic lifestyle and to do it on a budget, right? It's really interesting. There's a big platform for herbalism called Herbal Academy that just put out a post today, actually, on Instagram and probably Facebook and where else they copy their posts at. But it's about sustainability, how there are some herbs that are more appropriate to consume more often because they're more readily available, they're easier to attain, they're not found from far away, or they're not rare. Um, and so it's really an important factor. And I'm really glad they actually took the time to put together something like that because as herbs get more and more um, you know, of interest to people, of course, we're going to want to have more of them in our lives. We're going to have to figure out where they're going to come from, right? So this is not just a personal, um, you know, problem for us as consumers individually, but culturally, societally. We need to figure out how we're going to sustain ourselves. And a lot of herbs and essential oils are not used on the individual consumer basis. They're used by larger corporate interests. So, for example, most of the essential oils produced in the world are used by corporations like spice companies and food companies because essential oils are used as food additives. So, of course, there's a global impact and on how and why herbs and oils are used, and it's an important conversation to tap into for your own personal thing. And I've heard from individuals over the years, people really don't want to create waste. They want to have effective practices in their home. They want to be able to use the herbs and to use them correctly. And so we're kind of gearing into a conversation about that today. This is part of an ongoing conversation on my platform here on Substack. This whole week has been a big celebration, a launch, if you will, for my Substack here, Laura Baum Clinical Herbalist. And this event's called Become an Herbalist. We've already done 3 other sessions this week, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. This is our 4th session. We have one final session tomorrow at 2 p.m. Tomorrow, we're talking about professional paths and career opportunities for herbalism. It's a really great time to become an herbalist because a couple of main reasons, which I'll go into tomorrow, as well as what those opportunities are. So you can tap into them and start thinking about how to maybe add this onto your life and your career next year or this year. And I hope you do. Session 1 on Monday is all about belief, my own personal story of how I came to herbalism and why it's so important that we think about mindset in our healing journey. Tuesday's session, I dove into, why um, actually, I can't remember now, but I'm having a moment. Yesterday, I talked about herbal medicine making like a pro. Okay. Oh, Tuesday was the actual things you want to do to set yourself up for success with herbalism. So, yeah, this is all of it about just our everyday holistic system, right? And how it's so important not to just like tag on information and to keep seeking knowledge and forever knowledge, but we actually have to have a system in place to be able to implement the information effectively and to have people there who are going to be able to hold you accountable to your goals, help you stay positive in your mindset, and help you, get to the next stage that you want to be in your healing. So Tuesday's training was all about like the things, the basics of herbalism, the things that you really need to know about moving forward with herbalism for health goals and not just ideals, but really practically getting these things done in your life. So let's jump into our thing today. And it's all about building a local herbal network. So, how to create a sustainable herbal resource system. And this is something that I actually did in my life about 10 years ago. Um, and I want to talk to you today about that because it might completely change the way you approach your herbal lifestyle. Um, that is stop thinking that you have to grow, make, find, buy, and provide everything yourself, right? Not everything will come from you, right? That is just the way it is. Um, and it's also not going to be just going and getting one little thing here, one little thing there, because that's generally how I see people buying herbs a lot. They're like, oh, I have a headache, I'll buy this. I have a sore throat, I'll buy this. And they don't find the connection or the through thread between any of these pieces. So I think sometimes when we get interested in herbalism, gardening, natural living, and growing our own food, we can accidentally create this enormous list of things that we need to do. We need to grow our herbs, our own vegetables, our own flowers. We need to save seeds. We need to make our own medicine. We need to preserve everything. We need to know where our food comes from. And before we know it, we're overwhelmed. But there is another way. The best way to make sure you have access to the herbs and resources that you will need if you're going to do this isn't necessarily to grow everything yourself, it's to build a network. Your local community can become part of your herbal resource system. And today I'm going to show you how to think about that system in a very practical way. So, we're going to talk about creating your local network, mapping out who grows what, trading and bartering, connecting with farmers and CSAs, hosting seed and plant swaps, and perhaps most importantly, simplifying your own herbal priorities, right? Which definitely ties into what we've been talking about this week. That it's not adding on a lot more, it's actually simplifying your scope and being strategic about what you really should focus on now. You don't need to do everything, you need to do what matters to you most right now. So let's start there. Imagine that you live in an area where there are 10, 20, or even 50 people who are interested in growing plants, gardening, herbalism, homesteading, or simply sourcing better food. So one person can grow an incredible amount of medicinal herbs, and maybe another person has fruit trees, and someone else has tomatoes and peppers, someone else is growing their native flowers, someone has a huge vegetable garden, someone keeps bees, someone has chicken and eggs. I think we get it, right? Someone has a relationship with a local farmer, someone can grow mushrooms, someone is really good and prolific at saving seeds, has that type of setup for that proper seed storage. And then someone else may absolutely have no garden, but they have knowledge, tools, space, or connection. So there you go. That's a resource network. It's bioregional, it's strong, it's local. It means that everybody in your area will have something to contribute as a purpose, and you're all aligned with the same goals. You don't have to possess all the resources yourself. I know the ideal is, oh, I'm going to have one big farm one day, I'm going to have a homestead. The work in that is incredible, and most of these homesteads fail, right? Most of these farms fail because they're just really hard to get off the ground if you're new to it and inexperienced and don't come from a background or a lineage of farming. Um, I'm not saying that you shouldn't go for that goal, but what I'm saying is that if you really do want to shift into holistic lifestyle, you are going to need the resources and herbs to get started. So you have to have this in place, a system in place to ensure that you have what you need. Okay. That's all. It's not that hard. So instead of asking, how am I going to grow everything? Start asking who around me is already growing what I need. That question completely changes it. And I would encourage you to actually make a map. It doesn't have to be complicated. It could be a physical map, a spreadsheet, a notebook, a shared document with your gardening friends. And that's what they are. They're friends. When I started Richmond Herbalism Guild 10 years ago in our city, Richmond, Virginia, it was about creating something that didn't exist before. There were herbalists because there's enclaves of herbalism, especially in the mountains of Virginia, but nobody really clearly put a stamp on it and dropped the anchor and said, okay, we need a guild. We need an actual physical group of people who raise their hand over and over again and say, yes, I'm interested in herbalism. And yes, I want to represent that. And I want to have a space, an actual conversation, an ongoing conversation about how we use plants. And we've done so many different things. We've invited different herb farmers. And what you learn from that, from these interactions, is that people are actually quite open and receptive to your ideas. So, like, for example, we had one farmer who we talked to and spoke with, and he's like, you guys can just come out to our land. I've got all the herbs you're talking about. I've never sold them before because nobody showed interest before, but you guys can come out and forage everything that you need. And so then we had all the resources we need just by this one farmer alone, just for a few of our important herbs like elderberry, elderflower, roses. So it was just like a really great source. And to think about the price comparisons, I mean, when you're purchasing everything yourself locally, you're going out and picking, you're supporting local diversity of plants, right? Because you're not purchasing plants from far away. There's good quality, but also like it's not being shipped, it's not being air flown to you. um you are connecting with the ground and the land itself, so there's so much lack of waste there, and also a cost, definitely a cost saving, because you're doing most of the work yourself to harvest and to connect with that. And if you don't want to do the harvesting, guess what? Tap into your network, tell them, hey, like there's an opportunity to grow or to harvest these plants on this farm. Like, I don't want to do it, but if someone could do it for me or go and harvest and then we could all share afterwards. You see, so just communicate your needs and find a way. Plus, so many plants that are usable are just forgotten about because they haven't made it to commerce, but they're still there. So, like an example of this, you know, every day these larger herb companies are trying to find a way to find the herbs they need. So they're setting up new relationships with farmers abroad and internationally. Example, passion flower. A lot of the passion flower that's sold in commerce from major companies here in the United States, well, most of our herb companies are on the West Coast, by the way, not the East Coast. And they're it's good quality passion flower, but the passion flower actually grows prolifically in the southern region. So we can go outside in Richmond today. I can walk 5 blocks and find passion flower. It's everywhere. And yet, most of the passion flower that I can buy through an herb company, a reputable herb company, comes from Italy or somewhere else in the world. So it's really important to think about like those connections. Like, why not get what is available in your area? Why not tap into a human resource kind of network so that you can all do this together? So, who grows flowers? Who has fruit trees? Who sells plants? Who has extra produce? Who participates in a CSA already, right? Who can I jump on and be like, hey, like I'd like to add on myself to your thing? Who already has eggs? And start collecting this information, and you'll begin to realize that you're surrounded by resources at all times. And we learned during the pandemic that really it's the bioregional networks that save us like all the time because things get to you quicker. You get things that are better, faster, more effectively than having to wait for things to arrive on your doorstep from far away. You just have to build the relationships that connect you to them. All right. So the next couple of minutes, talk about bartering and buying, right? Great opportunities to save money is to practice trading and bartering. Okay. You're not going to always have to buy stuff. You can, you know, look at your own situation and be like, you know what? I grew a lot of calendula this year. Maybe I could, barter or trade some of my calendula flowers because I don't need that much for my reasoning, for my purposes. Maybe you can figure out that what your contributions to the network can be, and then you offer them. So I'm going to become the person in my local network who grows an abundance of this or makes an abundance of this, and then find a way to connect to people and ask them if they'd like some of that for something that they offer. I used to know someone who would do that with soap. She was a great soap maker, and she would offer her soap in exchange for some of our herbalism ideas, herbalism classes, herbalism products like fire ciders and elderberry syrups for the fall and the winter months. So it was a great equal exchange because soap is a wonderful thing like everybody needs, right? And it was handmade, cold processed soap in Appalachian style. So a really special recipe passed down to her from her family. And of course, she used the plants from her garden too. So that just made it extra special and connected to us. So, you're not operating in isolation anymore, right? You're going to create a distributed garden that's very powerful. And instead of one person trying to grow 20 different things, 20 different people can become really good at growing one, two, three, or four things. Does that make sense? You can become known in your network for a specific thing. And that is something very special. You don't have to go huge. You can go totally small and micro and make a bigger difference. Cool. So expanding beyond your own garden. Don't just look at people growing per herbs, look at your entire local food system. Think about farmers, CSAs, community supported agriculture. I've talked before about, different types of agriculture. So regenerative agriculture, organically grown foods, biodynamically grown foods. These are terms to look for as really gold standards for the quality of the food that you're eating and the resources and the land and how it's kept. And remember, holistic living isn't just about one plant growing in your backyard. It's about creating a relationship with the resources available around you. And farmers and CSAs can be an incredible part of this. So you may not be able to grow enough food to supply everything you eat, and that's okay. You don't have to. Maybe your garden supplies herbs, greens, and a few medicinal plants. So then your local farmer supplies vegetables you don't grow, and it fills the gaps. All right. So getting to know again where your resources are coming from, connecting, creating relationships are key here to making a sustainable network that'll save you money and you'll be able to build things sustainably. You also want to try having hosting seed swaps and plant swaps because um, it's really nice to have growing things, but if you can't turn those growing things into more growing things, you're going to have to continue to buy new seeds and new stock each year. So it is kind of important to learn proper seed harvesting and or tap into your network and figure out who can do this for you. Um, there's something very, very special about hosting a seed swap. You'll get a lot of excitement and a lot of interest from your local community. I would host your event in local gardening groups, master gardening groups, native plant groups, as long as you do native plants too. I would connect to local nonprofits that have to do with your local ecosystem, and you're going to find plenty of people who are interested in seed and plant swapping. This could be indoor plant cuttings, or it could be outdoor plants as well. So, like divisions of perennials in the fall. It could be actual bulbs for flower gardens. I mean, you're going to be able to find all the things you need just from extending an invitation and hosting your seed swap. You could do this in your new garden and that you're setting up, right? If you're doing the strategy I talked about on Tuesday, you have your own garden and or a space that already has a garden in your network or a learning garden or community garden or a space that feels enclosed and private. Maybe it could be a church or a workspace. There's lots of spaces to do it and you could do more than one. Get to know your community and create it around it. So if your community is very interested in wildflowers, you might make it a wildflower specific event. And know that seeds are like forever if you can have a proper system for storing them. So you might invest a little bit into that or ask your network if that's something that could actually help you spend money to do. Lastly, and this ties so well into what we've been talking about this week, and that's simplifying your scope. If you want to have all of the herbs you need, simplify your scope because you need to figure out what is the highest priority for your herbal efforts this year. So, not five priorities, not 20, but what is the highest priority? So, maybe your highest priority right now is food. And if that's the case, your garden should be designed around food production. Choose crops that are fast growing, prolific, nutrient dense, and resilient. Resilient because if you put in a crop that tends to get funguses, it's probably not going to do very well. Or if you get a crop that tends to get a lot of attention from insects, might not do well. Nutrient dense, meaning there are some crops that are good to have, but they're not nutrient full. But there's others that are incredibly nutrient dense that are grown in areas of the world where there is poverty or there is food issues, and so they're grown intentionally to combat malnutrition. You also want to think about your weather and your climate. You got to make sure the crops match your terrain and your environment. Fast growing. So if you have a plant that's from like a part of the world where it grows very fast because of the heat, and you grow it in your area, and it also has a heat that will help it grow, you'll have a very prolific crop that year. In the Southeast where I live, if I grow Asian greens or Asian herbs like Vietnamese coriander or gotu kola, it takes over my area very quickly because it has that bit of a nature to it. It's also a bit invasive here. So if I'm not paying attention, it will take over. But because I'm cultivating, I'll know that it's going to do really, really well for a crop, for an annual crop, to get a lot of crop in a very short amount of time. And that's what I mean by fast growing and prolific. Whereas other plants that might be a bit for a colder region, it won't take as much space and be as prolific. You also want to maybe think about for a food production your garden, perennial vegetables. So perennial herbs are herbs that come back year after year, and perennial vegetables are the same, but they're vegetables. So things like walking onions, lovage. There's even a tree kale. These are vegetables that will die back in the winter, but come back with huge reemergence in the spring, and they're a great investment in a garden that you're trying to focus on food production. So you won't, again, necessarily need enormous variety. if you're doing more of a food production, longevity garden approach, you're going to be spending a little bit more upfront to make sure you have the pieces in place, but you're getting so much back that it won't matter. And in the long run, you'll be saving because you don't have to buy new stock every single year. But maybe your highest priority is actually medicinal herbs for a particular focus. So like maybe what right now you're talking about you want plants for immune health because you know that you and your children, your family will need the things to get you through the cold and flu season. So, if that's the case, you're going to be growing herbs that are specific for immune health. We talked about keeping your own herbal research binder and having an effective herbal workspace this past Tuesday. Because the two fundamental activities that I want you to be practicing all the time are gardening and having the effective herbal workspace. And that's it. Not amassing tons of knowledge online, not taking tons of courses, not going to all of these conferences, but instead doing the activities on a routine basis because you're going to be learning from the actions you take. And they're going to be super high priority because they're only focusing on one thing at a time. So if you're doing that immune health focused, um, garden and immune focused space, you're only going to be growing herbs for the immune system. So you're not going to be growing herbs for any other intention, just the ones that you're doing at the time. So again, what matters most right now? I want you to decide that because you're going to organize your garden, your network, and your herbal workspace around that sole priority. So let's bring this all together because we're building a system, not a to-do list. If you want to have access to the herbs and resources that you need, which you're going to need if you're going to shift into a holistic lifestyle effectively, right? Even if you're just going to take one or two herbs, right? They're still coming from somewhere, right? Best to do it sustainably. Don't start by creating a giant list of everything you need to grow. Start by creating a network. Okay. So don't just make out your planning list of all the things to start your long term project on, and don't come at it from an individual, like, I'm only going to go out and do it this way kind of a deal. Think about it at a shared stake, a shared project. Find the people around you who are already doing the things you want, right? Most of success is putting yourself in the room with the right people. And it's putting yourself in a situation where people have already done what you are trying to do, right? That's a fast track to so much effectiveness in so many different areas, not just gardening. Map out what is available, find your local farmers, explore CSA. Start with there. Start with tapping in to what already exists and make it all connect. Get to know your local beekeepers, gardeners, growers, and producers, and then create opportunities to trade, barter, and buy. Host your seed swaps, host plant swaps, host community. Share your knowledge freely. There's value in that because people get to know you and how you work. Learn from other people and then simplify your own scope. Ask yourself, what is my highest priority this year? Is it food? Is it medicinal herbs? Is it learning? Is it building that garden? Whatever that priority is, let that guide your decisions because the goal isn't to create the biggest garden. The goal isn't to grow the most plants. And the goal certainly isn't to create another giant list of things you have to accomplish. It's to create a sustainable relationship with your local resources, your community, and the plants that support your life. So you don't have to do it all yourself. Grow what makes sense for you. Share what you have and receive what you need. And let your herbal lifestyle become something that is connected, sustainable, and simple enough to actually live. Thank you so much for joining me today. And if this gave you a different way to think about your garden and your herbal lifestyle, I'd love to hear from you. What is the one priority you're focusing on in your garden this year? And that is what I have for y'all today. And I will be back tomorrow for one last live for our Become an Herbalist live event here on Substack, Laura's Botanicals. Thank you all so much for all your comments and getting to know me in the chat. You're always welcome to DM me with any questions. I know I offered yesterday my Herbalism 101 sheet that's still available for you if you'd like a quick little checklist of how I break down making teas. Yesterday's herbal medicine making talk was really cool, and all of that information is, of course, saved on the live stream on my posts, so you can go back and watch those videos. And they've also made it their way to YouTube, so you can watch them there as well because we have a YouTube channel. Yeah, Everyday Herbals and Fast Track is enrolling. We're $20 a month at cancel anytime, where you can be further supported with the regimens that I propose here this week and get some accountability and direct support from a clinical herbalist. Thank you so much and have a good rest of your day. See you tomorrow at 2 o'clock for our final session.